practices on leveraging volunteers, right, to enhance manpower capacity, be it to support service delivery or to address your organization development needs, or both. Right? Our invited speakers will also share strategic and operational considerations from their experience in leveraging volunteers to enhance manpower capacity. They will also share good practices in creating, enhancing, and measuring volunteer impact on manpower capacity. Right, next. Yep, so our three speakers comes from three service clusters, right? And they are your disability, residential, and elder care cluster, your children, youth, and family cluster, and your mental health and community cluster. Do note also in the program schedule today, there will be a photo taking session, right before we go off for a very short break, right? And it will be after our first two speakers, Eileen and Eric, sharing. Yeah, so do prepare for the photo taking, right? And we will give you prompts at that session. So do stay with us throughout today's session, because then after your short break, Ming will come back and he will share his own learnings and experiences as well. Yeah? Next slide, please. So before we hear from our speakers, let us share key findings from the pre-event survey, which everyone here provided inputs to. Yep. So here you can see, right, who among us are here today, right? We actually have about 338 respondents at registration. And from what we can read from the pie chart here, more than 60% of our participants today are from the social service agencies and nonprofit organizations. And about 1/3 of us here today are from the public sector, with a small proportion of our friends who are from our corporate sector. Yep. Here we are presenting two graphs to you. The pie chart on your left, right, indicates about 90% of you have incorporated volunteers to enhance manpower capacity. And with more than half of this group, right, leveraging volunteers to support service delivery, right? There are two key challenges that we have noted from your responses, right, in terms of incorporating volunteers to enhance manpower capacity. And they are a lack of resource to support the initiative, as well as concerns about recruiting volunteers with suitable skills and commitment levels. And in these two graphs that we're presenting to you, right, we want to dive deeper into understanding the readiness of our SSAs in leveraging volunteers to enhance manpower capacity. So from the bar chart, right, on your left, right, it shows that actually a majority of our SSA have clearly defined roles to align volunteers' contributions to organization development or service delivery needs, right? And the pie chart on your left also indicates that a majority of our SSAs have designed volunteer roles that are recurrent over a period of time, right, for at least 6 months, right, to leverage volunteers to enhance manpower capacity. So relating this analysis to the challenge that was shared by SSAs in our previous slide, right? The challenge SSAs face may be in identifying and recruiting volunteers with the relevant skills and commitment level. And I think this is, although this is a small representation of our larger social service sector, I think this is an interesting issue that we could further delve on in future sessions or when we are engaging each other in the community. And finally, on measuring impact, we understand that a majority of our SSAs are currently focused on measuring output, right, as represented by the two higher bars in this bar chart, right? And they are specifically on the number of hours or tasks contributed by volunteers and on feedback from volunteers, right? So on this note, I would also want to highlight, next slide, please. Yeah, highlight to you. Right, the NCSS has recently launched the Volunteer Impact Measurement Kit on 22nd November last year. So for every one of us here today who were with us as well in the in-person event, welcome back. And I think this will be familiar to everyone, right? And this publication aims to support volunteer managers to assess and demonstrate the impact that volunteering brings to their volunteers, their service users, agencies, and of course, our partners. Right? It does so through a data-driven approach that provides outcome indicators, which SSAs may consider including in your volunteer management system for tracking and reporting of your impact, right? If you have not downloaded the publication, right, we've provided a QR code here on the screen so that you can scan that. If not, you can always go to NCSS website to download the publication, right? So, all right, now that we have a glimpse of the pre-survey findings, right, it's time to hear from everyone, right? Your own thoughts about the analysis that we've done on the pre-survey, right? So if I can just get everyone to do a quick scan of the QR code, or if you're already in Slido, just enter the code 1287088, right? And if I can then get you to share your thoughts on this question, right? Next slide. Yep. Using one word or a short phrase, could you share the benefits of leveraging volunteers to support organization needs and service delivery? Take a minute to gather your thoughts, and then please go ahead and type. Yeah, thank you for participants who are already entering your inputs. Yeah, sustainability, thanks. Great. Oh, somebody's typed in the code as well. Yeah. Yes, I think generally what we are seeing, well, save money, resources are tight in the sector, so they are definitely a good supplement to our manpower resource. And I think sustainability has been high on everyone's reflection, right? How do we then sustain service delivery to our service users as we continue to enlarge our service base, right? And to deepen our service impact as well, right? Many other words are coming up as well. Lesser burden for staff, right? Find talents, yep. Right? And our volunteers all come with many different skills, talents that they can offer to us, even at the organization development area, focus areas as well. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I think many of you all are still typing in, so keep them coming, right? Yeah. I'm loving the advocacy as well, right? We, apart from just leveraging on our volunteers to support service delivery, support our organization development needs, really they are a very strong advocate for us, right, in the communities that they belong to. And they can then also bring in more volunteers for each of our agencies as well. Yeah. Maybe just the last one for me to highlight is co-creation. I see that just besides sustainability, and I think that's a very valuable input from you guys, right? Co-creation, just engaging volunteers who are ready to contribute at higher levels, right? How do they come in? How do they help us to review service delivery models, review our programs on the ground so that we can increase or enhance our impact to our service users and the communities that we serve. Yeah. Yep. So thanks again. Thanks for all your active participation. I think this is great. We've got a huge word cloud here. And if there are any more words or short phrases that you are thinking about or have reflected on, just keep them coming, right? And we will then move on to the next segment for today, right? Which is our presentation. So I want to hand over to Esther as we move into the first speaker segment. Esther, over to you.
Thank you, Keng Hui. Yeah, so indeed, to support our learning today, we have invited 3 speakers to share their experiences and insights on leveraging volunteers to enhance our manpower capacity. So in their organizations, we have Eileen from SPD, who represents the disability cluster, and she will share on the operational enablers and challenges as a volunteer manager in SPD. Then we have Eric, Mr. Eric Hu, who will be sharing from KKCS as he represents the family and children cluster. He will be sharing the operational enablers and challenges as a volunteer manager. And then we have Mr. Chua Ming, who is from campus side, and he will represent the mental health cluster, sharing on the strategic enablers and challenges as founder of campus side, and also in his capacity as a leader in various national initiatives. So during the sharing, next up, each speaker, they will have about a 15-minute segment to share their experiences and knowledges knowledge, followed by a Q&A segment. And after that, we will convene all the speakers together for an overall Q&A. And during this Q&A segments, it'll be moderated by Keng Hui and myself, Esther. So next up, we'll be introducing Ms. Eileen Chua, Volunteer Manager at SPD. It is a non-profit organization that supports persons with disabilities. So Eileen, she oversees a pool of volunteers and leads a dedicated team to enhance volunteer management and impact. So with over 26 years of experience in the social service sector, including 8 years in volunteer management, Eileen is a seasoned professional committed to fostering impact and sustainable volunteerism. So over to you, Eileen.
Thank you, Esther. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us here and the opportunity to share SPD's journey in building a robust volunteer pipeline. Today, I'll walk you through how we integrate volunteers to enhance manpower capacity, the benefit this brings, and our strategy for sustainable volunteer management. First, allow me to share about SPD and its programs and services. SPD is a local charity set up in 1964 to serve people of all ages who are born with or have acquired disabilities later in life through accidents, old age, or illnesses. We were formerly Society for the Physically Disabled, but changed to just SPD in July 2014, as we now serve persons with other disabilities too. Our vision is to build an inclusive community where everyone is part of it, not apart from it. We are committed to working in partnership with people with disabilities to develop their potential to the fullest so that they can be self-reliant and independent. Next. Our purpose is to help people with disabilities or those who may develop disabling condition to reach their full potential. People that we serve include persons with physical, sensory, intellectual, and developmental disabilities, as well as seniors who are developing disabling conditions due to age, medical or surgical conditions. Next, please. We serve people with disability of all ages, from young children to adults to seniors. We offer more than 20 programs and services to meet their educational, employment, healthcare, and social needs. We are deeply committed to support the inclusion of individuals to live, work, and play in the community. Next slide, please. Today's topic is on building a robust volunteer pipeline, sustainable approaches to increase overall manpower capacity. Before I share how SPD leverages on volunteers to supplement our manpower, I would like to touch on the manpower needs and challenges for the disability cluster. SPD face tight manpower resources as all other SSAs. For the disability clusters, our work often requires intensive and personalized care, which can be stretching on our staff resources. The manpower needs of the disability cluster are shaped by the unique and complex requirements of individuals with disabilities. Some of the roles require staff with niche skill sets, such as frontline care and support staff for the Day Activity Center, trained teachers for the Early Intervention Program for infant and children, allied health professionals like therapists, psychologists, and the behavioral specialists, just to name a few. Next. This might highlight some of our key challenges that we faced. The disability cluster demands highly specialized skill sets, making it challenging to recruit and retain talent. Additionally, the emotional and physical demands of the work contribute to staff turnover. With competition from other sectors, for instance, the healthcare sector, it is also hard for us to retain experienced staff. There's always high demand for professionals, but supply is short. Next. Okay. What are some of the ways that we adopt to mitigate these challenges? Next slide, please. Yeah, we place emphasis on upskilling and development by investing in continuous learning opportunity for our staff. Learning include professional certification and cross-training programs. We also enhance our recruitment strategies by collaborating with educational institutions to build awareness and create pipelines for entry-level talent. Focus is also placed on staff well-being, where initiatives like mental health support, flexible work arrangements, and recognition programs are implemented. By leveraging on technology, such as the use of digital tools to streamline our administrative tasks, to improve our efficiency and reduce mundane work, staff can allocate their resources towards higher impact tasks. Lastly, we look into integrating volunteers to complement and support our manpower capacity to create a sustainable volunteer pipeline. I will share more in the following slide. PD work with both individual and group volunteers. Group volunteers include corporates, community groups, associations, and schools. Volunteers are deployed across our programs to support our staff in service delivery. These include both service-based and skill-based volunteers. Next. Different volunteer roles that can suit the different needs for groups and individual volunteers. They can choose which program or target group they wish to serve based on their schedules and interests. For instance, group volunteers who can volunteer on a regular basis can opt to be our activity facilitators, leading recreational sessions like art and craft or technology-based workshop at our day activity center and senior care centers. For those who can only support on ad hoc basis, they can volunteer at events, supporting us through bringing clients out for outings or organizing festive celebrations for them. Next, please. Individual volunteer is also an integral part of our volunteer pool. You can find them in our EPIC program as teacher assistant, helping in classroom activities, enabling our educators to focus on intervention for the students, or as home-based befrienders that work alongside with our social worker to provide emotional and social support to our clients, allowing our social workers to focus on imperative needs of the clients. Besides service-based volunteers, skill-based volunteers bring with them their expertise and experience to help us in our work. For example, we have talent acquisition volunteers from Economic conducting job search and resume writing workshop for our job seekers. We also have young leaders from Kapur Corporation forming a team to help our shelter workshop artisan collab to enhance our production processes, improve the sales and marketing strategies, and suggest new product ideas. Volunteers bring immense value to our organization. They enable us to enhance our capacity and extend our reach, improve the quality of our programs, and achieve cost efficiencies. More importantly, their involvement helps build an inclusive society where people of all abilities are valued and included. Next, please. Our journey in volunteer management has been a fulfilling one, but like any path, it's not without its bumps. We also face with challenges that is quite common across SSAs. One key challenge is volunteer retention. Volunteer availability can be irregular due to personal commitments. Emotional fatigue or the lack of fulfillment may also result in disengagement of volunteers, especially when volunteers do not see the immediate impact of their work. Volunteers may drop out due to competing priorities. At times, there is also skills gap, as certain roles, such as therapy support or program facilitation, require specific technical skills or training that most volunteers do not initially possess. Difficulties arises in striking a balance between skill-based volunteer and the organization's immediate manpower needs. Volunteers often require flexible schedules, which may not always align with the fixed operational needs of service programs. Adapting workflows to accommodate volunteers while maintaining service quality can be also a significant operational challenge. Another challenge is staff buy-in. Staff may view volunteers management as not part of their job, but an additional task. Some hold the thought that volunteers are competitors to take over their work. This requires a lot of communication to share the value of volunteers to staff, that volunteers are here to assist in service delivery and help to offload some of the work. Next, please. Challenges also presented to us chances. It helps us to see the gaps and areas that we can improve on. By working on these areas, we can close the gap and achieve more. How we do it? We are looking at building continuity by partnering with more corporates that can provide employee volunteers through structured programs, ensuring there is a steady stream of manpower. I would like to share our experience from our participation in the Project V initiative. Project V is a collaboration between NCSS and MVPC, which was piloted in 2023. It encourages sustainable volunteering at scale among businesses in partnership with community organizations. In the first year, when we partnered with LTA, they supported our DAC Without Walls program to bring our clients for activities in the community. Although they can provide us with manpower, they could not commit to have regular volunteer each time. Learning from this experience, last year, when we worked with a new corporate partner, Razor, we discussed and worked out a rostering schedule with them. There will be few core volunteers supporting the program in each session. With this rostering, we not only get the constant manpower supply, it also enhance the whole volunteering experiences for the staff volunteers. The core volunteers could share the know-how and guide new volunteers with their roles. With regularity in volunteering, it also enables the staff volunteers to build bonds with our clients. Program staff also noted the benefits of having regular volunteers. Not only volunteers are here to help with the operation and ease the workload, it also gives us more bandwidth to expand our program and do more. School and higher learning institutions also have under-tapped manpower. More long-term partnership with them will help us to get regular participation by student volunteers. Not forgetting our individual volunteers, by providing flexibility in our schedules, we can accommodate to volunteers' needs, and through regular engagement with them, we are able to understand any change in volunteers' requirement and adjust and align in a timely manner. Next, please. We also have tailored onboarding programs for volunteers. Volunteers require sufficient training to deliver quality services. We provide comprehensive induction sessions for them, especially the new volunteers. The induction sessions covers topics like disability awareness, how to communicate and interact with persons with disabilities, and wheelchair handling skills. This helps to equip the volunteers with basic knowledge and ease any uncertainty that new volunteer might have and boost their confidence in carrying out the assigned task. There will also be ongoing role-specific training for volunteers so that they can improve their skills to meet evolving needs. Thanks. It is crucial to provide strong support to our volunteers to create a sense of belonging to our organization. This can be done through regular check-ins to gather volunteers' feedback and progress, find out any challenges they face and what additional support they require from staff. In addition, recognizing the contributions of volunteers increases motivation and retention of volunteers with the organization. Some example on how this can be done is through presenting awards and certificates, give personal acknowledgements, and feature volunteers' work on social media. Next, please. Last but not least, leveraging on technology is the way to go. Having a robust volunteer management system facilitates the recruitment, tracking of volunteer contribution hours, and make the scheduling task easier. This ensures smooth coordinations and deployment of volunteers. To have seamless and timely communication is also key to boost volunteers' volunteering experience with us. Tapping on digital platforms like WhatsApp group, maintain real-time communication with them. Volunteers are the backbone of our effort to build an inclusive community. By fostering partnership and collaboration with volunteers, we can create a sustainable volunteer pipeline. Together, we can continue to make a difference in the life of those we serve. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Eileen, for your insightful sharing on SPD, how you actually leverage volunteers, and to be so candid to share also how you overcome the challenges that are faced. Yeah, so now we'll move on into the Q&A segment. And yeah, so we'll invite the participants to scan the Slido QR code and input your questions. So meanwhile, I'll start with the first question to you, Eileen. Right, so you shared about the benefits of leveraging volunteers. Perhaps you could share with us what are the kind of service outcomes that actually strengthened as a result of having volunteers to supplement the work of staff.
With the involvement of volunteers, definitely we see benefits that can help with strengthening our key service outcomes. These include the increased client engagements and improved program reach. For instance, by facilitating meaningful activities and offering personalized attention that staff may not have the capacity for, volunteers enhance the quality of care and interaction that the clients received. In addition, their contribution also enable us to expand our services to more beneficiary without increasing our operational costs. And lastly, I think volunteer involvement help to foster a greater community integration for persons with disabilities. They help us to break down societal barriers and create a more inclusive environment.
Thank you, Eileen, for sharing the really detailed explanation as well, and how it actually contextualizes, to the disability sector. Yeah, perhaps if you can also continue to understand further, how do you actually determine then? I understand you have also volunteers, individual groups, right? Individual volunteers and group volunteers. How do you actually determine, like, say, which program are actually suitable to, bring in volunteers? In the role.
Okay. We will have to do a careful risk assessment of our programs and also do pilot testing if there are new volunteer roles. We will evaluate the complexity of the task, the level of supervision required, and what is the potential impact on the clients before we roll out volunteer roles for volunteers to take on. For instance, volunteers are better suited for roles like befriending or activity facilitation, rather than tasks that require specialized skills. So for new volunteer roles, what we do is that we will pilot in a controlled environment, allow staff to assess the so-called feasibility, gather feedback from volunteers and clients to ensure that the roles managed by volunteers are effective and meaningful for all the stakeholders.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I also see questions coming in from the audience. Yeah, so you talk about maintaining a controlled environment to test the suitability. So along that lines, perhaps you can share a little bit more, right? How do you actually then maintain the quality of the services provided by your volunteers? Because your beneficiaries, they are all of different profile, different demographics as well.
And before we roll out any so-called new volunteer roles, definitely we are in talk with the programs staff to understand what are their needs, what kind of additional support they require from volunteers before we craft out the volunteer roles. Then when the new role is out, we will make sure that we test with a small group to have the staff closely monitor the whole delivery to make sure that volunteer meets the standards, the service standards also. And of course, it has to come with a lot of training and guidance from the staff to make sure that the volunteer can do an equal good job as what the staff does. You're muted, Esther.
Yes, thank you, Eileen. Yeah, so thanks for sharing so much on that. It's very helpful to understand. The audience has also asked another interesting question, right? Apart from piloting, now we go on more to the nature of the role, right? Apart from piloting, some of them have asked, do any of your volunteers take on more of a leadership type of role in volunteering? And how do you build on the efforts of these, like star volunteers?
This is still work in progress, I would say, because for our programs, most of our programs are on a weekday, run on weekdays. So we are trying our best to keep the volunteers, I would say, rather than straight away, go into, a leadership role, because some volunteers require a longer period of time to build the confidence and the skill set to be able to take on a volunteer leader role. So this is still work in progress for SPD. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's work in progress, but it's something that you are working towards.
Yeah.
And I think that's very encouraging to know. Yeah, indeed. Earlier on, you also shared an interesting point about leveraging on technology as well. Yeah, so I think, perhaps in terms of leveraging on volunteers, it will definitely shape your processes, right? Your volunteer impact management processes. So could you share a bit on the framework, perhaps, of your VMS? Yeah, on how you actually have a system that supports the involvement of volunteers.
With the robust VMS, definitely it helps us to cut down a lot of manpower, so-called data entry and a lot of work, paperwork. A lot of so-called processes can be automated, where we are looking at also further enhancing our VMS to allow volunteers to register directly into the portal to sign up for events and so-called activities. This will help to cut down a lot of our so-called manual work. We also use a QR code for volunteers to scan to check in and out of their on their attendances. So we no need to manually mark attendance of the volunteers. These are little ways that we have to make sure that it can help us in our work delivery and also create a better so-called pleasant experience for our volunteers.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it's nice to know that, even operational matters, right? Like QR code and all that can let technology, support that so that you can have the human touch with the volunteers. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's see if there's any more questions coming in. Keep it coming as well for Eileen. Maybe because for serving people with disabilities, might there be any additional protocols or checks that you all need to do, and you might then need to incorporate that into your VMS as well?
Working with vulnerable groups like persons with disability definitely require additional protocols to ensure the safety and dignity is maintained. At SPD, what we do is that we conduct thorough screening processes. For instance, we will interview the volunteers to understand what is their requirements, what is their strength, before we even look at deploying them to our programs. And where applicable, we also do background checks to ensure that the volunteers are suitable for the roles. Yeah, so we also throw in training, because it is very important to make sure that volunteers have that knowledge and skills to do the basic so-called delivery of service programs. Yeah, so training include like disability etiquettes, safeguarding practices, and how to communicate and how to handle sensitive information. Yeah.
Thanks, Eileen. Perhaps a last question riding on what you have responded. So audience have also asked, in the case where you have volunteers that actually don't meet these expectations, right? With all that stringent training they have given, but they don't meet the expectations, the niche skill sets that are required, then how do you engage these volunteers?
I think in SSA, there are many other areas that we require the support of volunteers, not necessarily the frontliners where they do the service delivery. Volunteers can also support us in the back end, like doing some administrative work, fundraising, or even as ambassador. I think these are ways that they can help to advocate and support us in one way or another. Yeah.
Great to know that volunteers are widely needed in your organization. Thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you everyone for your participation in this Q&A segment. Now over to you, King Hui.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Eileen, for sharing with us your experiences and learning. All right, so the next slide, you will see Mr. Eric Hu, right, who is the volunteer manager at the Volunteer Center at Jalan Besar. Right, it is operated by Kampung Kapur Community Services, an SSA that seeks to provide support to families in need through programs and services offered at their family service centers. Eric works with volunteers in various capacities, including facilitating partnerships and managing volunteers to support service delivery to the disadvantaged and vulnerable in the social service and healthcare sectors over the last 16 years. So over to you, Eric, for your sharing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Keng Hui, for the introduction. A very good afternoon to my fellow VM practitioners and friends. Just got to know that this video will be on YouTube, so I was thinking whether I should put on my best DJ voice for this, right? Okay, my name is Eric, and like what Keng Hui has mentioned, I'm currently the program head of SGCS Volunteer Center at Jalan Besar, operated by Kampung Kapur Community Services, or KKCS in short. I'm also doing the volunteer management aspect for KKCS. Yeah, I would like to share this. I would like to start this sharing with a note of gratitude to a lot of people for today. First of all, to Priscilla and team from NCSS for their kind invitation for me to share the work that I do at KKCS, and Keng Hui and Esther and team from MPAC for their support in this sharing session. And also, I'm grateful to share this stage with fellow practitioners like Eileen and Ming, and also learning from them in this session today. Last but not least, I'm also grateful to my team, colleagues, and volunteers at KKCS for making this sharing possible. There are a few segments to my sharing today, namely, first, for those of you in the sector who have not heard of us, I'd like to introduce my parent organization, Kampung Kapur Community Services, to everyone. Second, I'll be sharing on volunteerism in family services, linking it to social work in general. And also third, I will share some of the challenges that I face and overcoming them as part of my work. Without further ado, I'll get started. So at KKCS, our aspiration is to strengthen families and building the community. We started in 1978 with Kampung Kapur Methodist Church reaching out to provide academic support to children living around the church area, and started our first FSC Family Service Center in 1987 in Rowell Wood. So we have been in the community for more than 40 years. Our mission is to reach out. It's okay. Our mission is to reach out in Christian love to the surrounding community by providing programs and services to help families in need, irrespective of language, race, or religion. Next. Just to share a bit more about our values, because these are a lot of the values that are used in the work. Our values are trust, respect. Next slide. Uncompromising integrity, service to all, and also teamwork. If I notice it, if you combine them together, and the acronym will still be trust, right? T for trust, R for respect, U for uncompromising integrity, S for service to all, and T for teamwork. I mentioned that these values are extremely important to us. As a volunteer manager, I use these values to guide our work with volunteers and partners. For example, I use these values to frame our code of conduct to guide our volunteers in their work, aligning them to the values of KKCS. Next slide. In just a snapshot of our organization of KKCS in 2024, we have grown to more than 100 staff, serving 6 regions in Jalan Besar. Serving Jalan Besar region through 6 services, and we have engaged more than 200 volunteers annually. KKCS has grown quite fast in the last 5 to 6 years or so. Next slide. We currently have 6 services, namely our 2 FSC, Kampung Kapur Family Service Center, Wampo Family Service Center, and we have 3 family-centric services, Safe and Strong Family Preservation, which works very closely with Child Protection Services, Strengthening Families Program at FSC, which works with families undergoing through marital conflicts, and also Kickstart, which works with disadvantaged family with children from 0 to 6 years old. And last but not least, SG Cares Volunteer Center at Jalan Besar, which is led by me. And we have grown, you can stay at the previous slide, please. Yeah. We have grown from 2 FSC to the 6 services in the last 5 to 6 years. And with it comes the need to enhance manpower capacity, both professional and volunteering. To support the work that we do in the community, there are a couple of challenges in transiting to relying solely on professional manpower to including more volunteers in our work to support the enlarged scope of work that we do. Next slide. Most of the services that we have are led by social workers, and in social work, there are 3 main components. They are casework, group work, and community work. So how does volunteers help to support these 3 components? In this slide, I have shown some examples according to my limited experience and knowledge, but these examples are not exhaustive. So in casework, I think sometimes social workers may require the support of medical escorts for frail clients to get them to their medical appointments, befrienders to support the psychosocial health of clients, play and literacy facilitators to help disadvantaged children in their growth, in their development, mentors for youth, and also even parents in need, and also translator for transnational families, etc. In group work, social workers may also require the support of childminders if, for example, if their parents are attending workshop facilitated by them, co-facilitators working with social workers for children in workshops, and also skilled facilitators to train clients in required skills, etc. In community work, social workers may require the support of outreach ambassadors to reach out to more people in the community, research support for surveys, information gatherings, initiatives within the communities, and volunteers to support events and community initiatives, etc. So in the next slide, I would like to share how volunteers have supported in relation to manpower capacity for the community initiative by Kampung Kapur FSC. So the initiative that we have at KKFSC is called Kasih Sayang. So Kasih Sayang was initially established as a community fridge. The aim is to support mutual aid and shared provisions in the community. And this initiative supports close to 100 residents in the community per week. So at the start, when we started this initiative, social workers were the one leading this program. However, over time, some of the clients started feedback to us, expressing their wish to support this initiative as volunteers to help to prepare and distribute the provisions. And we have recruited them as volunteers to help with the community fridge. Next slide. So Kasih Sayang, especially for the last 1 year or so, have grown to be more than just a community fridge. So some of the community volunteers have expressed their desire to learn English, and 2 other volunteers have came forward to help this by starting an English class, right? So other than preparing and distributing the donated food to the residents in our community, they have come together to learn the English language together, right? The empowered volunteers also express their wish to organize festive celebrations with the residents. So what do social workers do is to really come in and support these ideas and initiatives, and the main bulk of the work of the organizing and support comes from the residents volunteers. The needs are expressed by the community. So as the volunteers are also residents themselves, manpower capacity for community engagement is supported because the volunteers, the residents are involved in advertising the events, organizing, and also running the events itself. Yeah. And Kasih Sayang reflected my personal belief that one of the better or the best, I'll say best, but better method of volunteer recruitment is by word of mouth. Why? Because the recruiters are volunteers themselves, and the efficacy element is strengthened through real life examples. So another example we have at KKCS is where the volunteers come to support manpower capacity is with the Kickstart team, where we recruited volunteers to enhance literacy and play for disadvantaged children in their homes. The volunteers are able to be the hands of our social service colleagues in supporting the development of children through activities, and also the eyes and ears of our social service colleagues through monitoring and feedback of changes in the children through engagement in these activities. This may sound easy, but there are certain challenges that we face when getting volunteers to support the work of our social service colleagues. Yeah. Next slide. Due to time constraint, I am just going to share two of the challenges. Number one, volunteerism as culture. I think a lot of times, most of the work that we do in family-centric services are clinically focused. And to say the truth, a lot of our social service colleagues or social workers may be overloaded with daily operational demand. And because of that, they may not be able to fulfill their role in volunteer management or even recognize the importance of their role in volunteer management. I believe that for volunteer management, this is not the sole responsibility of the volunteer manager, but every single one who engages the volunteer, they have a role to play in it. At KKCS, we often talk about the importance of a good volunteering experience as a guiding principle for volunteer management. And to achieve that, everyone needs to play their part. As a volunteer manager, I think I did an okay job, or rather, I can do a good job by recruiting volunteers, by interviewing, by onboarding the volunteers, by making their experience fantastic. But if the social service colleagues deploying the volunteers, engaging them during deployment, does not do a good job at engaging them well, then all the previous efforts are wasted. And just one negative experience is all it takes to really push the volunteer away. Well, I just been informed that I have 5 minutes left, so I'll go a little bit quicker, yeah? I think a lot of our social service agency have our start when a group of inspired and steadfast volunteers come together to support a cause, and our agency is founded in the process. Hence, I think volunteerism is really integral to our social service culture. Yeah. Hence, I think in advocating for volunteerism in family services, the second challenges that I face is that our social service colleagues may not see volunteers as directly or essentially important to the operational work that they do. There are many reasons why. I think I've mentioned some of them. Number one is some of them may think that volunteer management as an additional demand on their already limited time and resources. Some of them may have negative experience previously when they have experienced difficult volunteers that they have to manage, adding on to the stresses of their daily work. They may see volunteers as additional manpower to take over some of their functions, but usually I will share that the volunteers are there not to take over your work, which I think this is something opposite to what Eileen has shared earlier on, whereby her colleagues are afraid that the volunteers may take over their work. Because I think I like to advocate that, hey, they are there to support your work, not to take over the work that you don't want to do, but to support the work that you do so that it can be more efficient and effective. I mean, just to share an example, not in KKCS, but with a social worker in other organization, whereby she has asked me for a volunteer to help befriend a client living alone in the community. I rejected the request after understanding the essentials of the role, because the social worker wanted someone to support the client after her discharge of the client. Why did I reject? Because number one, the volunteer cannot take over the work of a social worker, and the volunteer is not trained to do so. There are a lot of risks involved in deploying the volunteer to do so, because the volunteer will be discharged by the social worker. And there is no support for the volunteer as well if anything happens. Therefore, I think as a volunteer manager, it's our role to advocate for volunteerism, but at the same time also educate our fellow colleagues on volunteer management as well, which is something that I do quite often to overcome the challenges. Next slide. I think to also help overcome the challenges, first of all, we need to understand the work of our social workers, our social service colleagues. It's part of our needs analysis. We need to know what is expected outcomes and how can volunteers support this outcome through their role. And to deepen the insights analysis, sometimes I will also suggest to shadow some of our social workers in that particular program that they require volunteers, so that I can have a better understanding of what that particular role requires. Yeah. Understanding the work of our social service colleagues is also important for the next step, which is to advocate and educate. I think number one, time's up. Okay, so let me quickly do my last point. I think it's really to advocate to the management and also to educate them on the roles and resources required. What can we all do together for a good volunteering experience? And I would like to end my sharing with another note of gratitude. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope my short sharing session has been useful. I'll be more than happy to learn from everyone. I'm open to a coffee chat if anyone is interested. Just drop me a text or an email. Happy Lunar New Year in advance. May all be well and happy. And in case you are wondering who is it in the picture, yes, it's me in my God of Prosperity costume, doing my volunteer work. Yep. So that's all for me. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day ahead.
Thank you, Eric, for your insightful sharing. Right, and as we go into the Q&A segment for Eric, right, I would like to encourage all our participants online to scan the QR code for Slido and to input your questions to Eric on Slido. Yeah, we will have our team ready to highlight the key questions that we can ask Eric over there. Yeah. So as you are doing this, maybe I can start this Q&A segment with Eric. Right. So Eric, just now you were talking about a key challenge with managing the existing employees within the SSA, for example, who may be resistant to change, right? Because of many factors, like, are they going to take over my job? I'm going to waste, or maybe I'm going to take a lot more time to onboard a volunteer. I might as well do it myself, right? Taking on a perspective of which program, right, would suit a volunteer to come in to support, right, be it a service delivery program or an organizational capacity program. How then do you determine which of these programs are suitable for volunteers to be deployed into?
I think, like I mentioned, I think it's really about what is the objective of the program itself. So if whether volunteers can really play a role, or what kind of volunteers. So if the program itself, the outcome, for example, for the client is rather clinically heavy, then this, even for a volunteer to be engaged in, we also need to consider the experiences of the volunteer, the skill set of the volunteer, and also talk about the resources required to manage the volunteer. Whether it is something that our social service colleagues can manage. And we should also look at risk management portion of it. So if everything comes together and it doesn't really make sense for the volunteers to be deployed, then sometimes, rarely, but sometimes I will suggest not to have a volunteer. Sometimes, but if they can take a lesser role, or there are particular areas that will help them achieve the objective, that some volunteers can assume that role, Then we'll discuss also in detail what is the job description like. So again, like what are the resources available? Are they able to do so to be for a good volunteer experience? Because ultimately, if the volunteer experience is not good, then it doesn't help to achieve the objective that they are looking for, and it also doesn't do good not only for the volunteers but also for the beneficiaries who are being served by the volunteer as well. Yeah.
Thanks for the response. Just following up with a question from one of our participants today, right? They would like to know, how do you then advocate for greater adoption of volunteers in the work that we do, right? If the main issue that we face is lack of buy-in from the rest of the agency.
I think there are a few things. Number one is, how well do you know the work of our colleagues? Yeah, I think it is to advocate for it. It must also make sense to the people that you are advocating. So if you understand the work of our colleagues, like especially in terms of whether is it casework, group work, or com work, then only then can you advocate in terms of, like what kind of volunteers is required, how many volunteers are required, what kind of skill set of volunteers are required to really help you achieve the things that you want to achieve, or not only the details of the work, but what is the outcome of the aspiration of the services that you are advocating towards. Because once it must be aligned in that sense also. Kid, we must have it doesn't help if we just go in and say, oh, hey, volunteering is good, wow, we must have volunteers in all our services. But does it make sense? Is it aligned with what the agency wants to do, or what the services hope to achieve? It must be aligned in that. So once they have a sense that, hey, this is aligned with what I want to do, and volunteers can help me achieve that despite my limited professional manpower capacity, then the advocacy has a higher chance of being successful.
Thanks. I think another follow-up question, which I think is very related to what we're talking about, which is change management for our agency staff, right? If the staff has very high expectations of the volunteer as they are deployed into support service delivery, right? Specifically service delivery, what are some of your own practice that you can share here today for the benefit of all the participants listening in?
Let me think about it. So for in terms of high expectation, what kind of high expectation are you looking at in terms of their ability?
Yeah, perhaps their ability, requiring them to take on quite a number of tasks concurrently, and expecting the volunteers to deliver as good as perhaps the staff or trained staff can. How do you help to manage that?
I think it's really about from the start, it's about, other than advocacy, it's about education. Really letting the staff know that these are the roles and responsibilities that the volunteers can do or cannot do, and for the volunteers to take on additional things that is aligned with the high expectation. Then what are the resources that the social service professional himself or herself need to put in to support the volunteers to achieve that? So for example, if you expect a volunteer to provide a lot more psychosocial support to clients through the use of specific models, or even have some being able to collect certain information from them, then training is required, right? Or to be better able at supporting the client through small issues, so that the social worker don't need to intervene, for example. Then there are other resources required, whereby maybe there are, if you look at training, maybe you need to have a volunteer circle whereby you get them in every once a month, once every 2 months, to enhance their skill set, knowledge, and experience, and learn from each other experiences to be able to do that. And that all require time and resources. So if you have that particular expectations for these volunteers, are you able to put in the resources to allow them to also scaffold and allow them to reach the level of knowledge and ability to live up to their expectations? I think this is something that I usually educate, not say educate, I will share with social service colleagues.
Thanks for that response. I think one question that I'm seeing from participants as well, maybe a very difficult one, is in your experience, right? And you've listed quite a number of service delivery programs, right, across KKCS, right? In your experience, then, is there a good ratio of staff to volunteer, right, for each of these programs that you've been working with? And perhaps the question is there ever a right balance of volunteers and staff?
I personally don't think that there's a assigned a good number that helps to guide, you know, the balance, the ratio that helps to guide volunteering program. It really depends. There are many factors. Number one is the depth of the work, whether we are able to get volunteers of that particular caliber to be able to support that work itself. Or, for example, if you look at group work, if you have only like 2 social workers leading the program and you have 10 children, what is a good ratio? Some may say that, hey, it's like 1:2, for example. Or you are working with people living with dementia. And different stage of people living with dementia, the volunteer or the support ratio can be is really quite different. Yeah. So, for example, if you have someone with moderate to late stage of dementia and may have some disruptive behaviors, then for volunteers to support that particular befriending program and all that stuff will require it to be maybe 1-to-1 for support. Or maybe for a small group, you have 1 staff, but the max you can go is maybe 5 volunteers to 10 beneficiaries in that particular program itself. It really depends on many things, like what are really the needs of the beneficiaries, what is the outcome of the program itself, and whether we are able to get good enough volunteers, skilled one or experienced one, to be able to do that. It really depends a lot on the different conditions. Yeah. So I really don't have a very optimal answer to that. Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'm still seeing quite a number of questions being posted on Slido, but our time is up for the Q&A segment. We will reserve your questions for the general Q&A later, and we will resurface some of these questions as well for Eric. Yeah. So thanks, Eric. Thank you for sharing your insights and your learning with everybody today. Right.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Yeah.
So last but not least, we have Mr. Ming, the founder and executive director of Campus Sci. It is a non-profit organization that aims to promote mental health awareness and peer support among youths and young adults in the schools and workplaces. So Ming serves on the steering committee of the Singapore Mental Wellbeing Network, the national partnership arm supporting the Interagency Task Force on Mental Health and Wellbeing. He also co-leads the youth work groups under the National Mental Health Anti-Stigma Committee Beyond the Label Collective. Perhaps you have heard of Beyond the Label as well. So over to you, Ming.
Sorry. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes,
okay.
we can hear you. Can.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, so I'm logging on through phone. Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ming, and I'm the founder and executive director of Campus Sci. We're a youth mental health non-profit organization that serves young people who are struggling with mental health conditions. So thank you very much to the NCSS team, Priscilla and her team, for actually allowing us and inviting us to actually share today, and also King Hui and the Impact team for having us today. Yeah, and very good to see so many familiar faces from the public, private, and people sector today. Next slide. Yeah. So probably I can share a bit about what I'll be sharing today for today's session. So I'll just give a brief introduction of who we are as an organization and what do we do at Campus Sci. And then the second portion is really very much on how do we incorporate and leverage on volunteers into our organization's services and programs to enhance manpower capacity. And thirdly, how do we actually leverage volunteers on a national level in the mental health sector through the nationwide campaigns like Beyond the Label, and also the SG Mental Wellbeing Network. And last but not least, I think my fellow peers, panelists have also shared about, some of the challenges which are actually faced by, practitioners in the field. For our side, probably I'll share a bit more on our success factors that actually drive strong volunteer culture. And if you have any questions later after my sharing, feel free to let me know. Thank you. Next slide. Right. So as you can see, those in orange, Campus Ambassadors t-shirt, they are actually our volunteers. They are called Campus Ambassadors because they are volunteers from the IHLs, Institutes of Higher Learning, and also young working adults in the corporate and working world. So this was actually taken during our launch at the Red Box at Somerset during 2017 itself. And as you can see, we've been working with different partners from the public, private, and people sector over the years, like NCSS, EIC, H3B, IMH, NYC, so on and so forth. Next. Right. So, who are we? So, I think just as briefly shared, Campus Sci is actually a registered non-profit organization. We aim to promote mental health through 5 main key pillars, namely advocacy, training, support, volunteering, and intervention to create an inclusive and supportive community for youth with mental health conditions. Our vision is to actually rally and empower like-minded youth within the campus and beyond, alongside young working adults who are passionate about making change in the mental health community from the ground up to it in Singapore. I shan't go much on the mission and values, right? Probably I'll go to the next slide. Yeah. Right. So I think today's main key topic is how do we actually incorporate volunteers into our services and programs, right, to enhance manpower capacity. And at Campus Sci, we really believe in co-creating programs and services with our volunteers. And our volunteers are mainly young people. So they're aged 15 all the way until 35. And because that's the definition of a young person in Singapore, right? So I think many of us here are youth or young adults, or probably youth at heart, right? So our first key pillar is actually advocacy. Every year we train about 50 volunteers. We call them Campus Ambassadors, which you have seen during our first page earlier. Right. So what they do is that after they're trained with basic mental literacy and peer support skills through a 3-month training program itself, they'll actually go out with our staff team to actually share some of the mental health trainings and talks and workshops or advocacy related panel dialogues and discussions with policymakers and all throughout events and also our programs. Right, so we've been doing quite a lot of outreach work, particularly in the IHLs, so like the universities, the polytechnics, and the ITs. We've also been working 1 students to Sec 5 students. Yeah, apart from that, we also do quite a lot of events and programs, and these are all co-curated with our youth volunteers and our ambassadors with their help. So our second key pillar is actually training, right? So just now I was mentioning about peer support training. So after the peer support training that our youths have gone through, right, we will actually tap on their expertise because who knows their fellow peers better than the youths themselves, right? So, now we are into our 7th cohort of Campus Sci peer support training. What we do is that we actually get, our first cohort or even earlier cohorts of peer supporters to actually join us to actually train fellow juniors in future peer support training programs. And then our third key pillar is actually peer support. So what the peer supporters do after they are trained is that they will actually go back to their schools or their workplaces to form communities, right, to actually support their peers who might be in distress or struggling with mental health conditions. During COVID itself, we realized that it's also very important, right, to actually pivot into online services. So what we did was that we have quite a lot of young people and caregivers writing into us or DMing us, on Facebook, Instagram, or even emailing us, right? Seeking help and basic emotional support. So what we did was that we paired this youths who are in distress up with our peer supporters, or we call them our ambassadors. And then from there, they will actually have one-to-one kind of basic emotional support online through WhatsApp services or even Telegram chats. Yeah. Right. So that's our third key pillar. And of course, our fourth pillar is actually volunteering. Oh, sorry, can I have the previous slide back? Yeah. Just two more. Yeah. Yeah, so we started off as a grown-up before we became a registered non-profit organization. So we've been serving the beneficiaries in the Institute of Mental Health, Singapore Association of Mental Health, and all that. And so what we do, tapping on our volunteers, our youth volunteers, is that because youths are very creative, right? So what they do is that they come up with programs and services like arts or even sports to actually engage those youth beneficiaries in SAMH, Singapore Association of Mental Health, and also some of the seniors who are actually in IMH. So we actually have our youth volunteers join us every week at IMH in the past to actually serve this senior patients in IMH itself through arts and through music activities. And just I think you saw Eric, right? Like during festive celebrations and Chinese New Year, National Day and all, we would also organize such events and activities to engage the beneficiaries. And of course, last but not least, intervention, because mental health is actually a spectrum, right? So, of course, you have those who are the general population who is mentally healthy, and of course you have those who are active listening or listening here. So for intervention services, what we do is that we have our peer supporters complementing the social workers, the counselors, right, in their intervention services. And later I'll share a bit more with an upcoming national initiative, which is actually the National Youth Mental Wellness Center, which is called the Integrated Wellness Center, IWC, and how we actually leverage on our trained youth volunteers to actually complement the services that we do with the social workers and the counselors. Yeah, next, thanks. Right, so that was on an organizational level. Next, I'll share a bit more on what we've been doing, right, together with partners from the public and private people sector on the national level. And just now, I think Esther has mentioned, right, one of it, I will be very thankful to be part of the steering committee of the SG Mental Wellbeing Network. So this is actually the partnerships arm of the Interagency Task Force and Mental Health and Wellbeing, right? It was launched in July 2022, which is 2 years plus ago, right? And our two focus areas back then was to actually increase the peer and community support for our citizens, be it seniors, young people, or the general population, particularly piloting the wellbeing circles, which I'll share a bit more with you guys later. And also second focus areas is actually to create more awareness, mental health awareness and engagement initiatives, not just for the community itself, but also to involve synergies for all three sectors, public, private, and people sectors. Yeah. Next. Right, so what is a wellbeing circle? Right, so a wellbeing circle is actually a group of leaders and volunteers, right, who have skills to look after their own mental well-being as well as that of others. We hope that through these well-being circles, by training citizens like you and I, with basic mental literacy and peer support skills, we can better help raise awareness of mental well-being issues and resources in Singapore in the different constituencies, right? So what we do is that we teach and equip these citizens, right, fellow Singaporeans, with basic mental literacy and peer support skills to look after themselves and also with others, because we really believe in preventive care, right? It is also a platform and safe space where citizens can support one another in a trusted space. And of course, last but not least, training them, these volunteers, to be peer supporters to support all our programs and activities. Next. Right, so as you can see, currently we have about 12 wellbeing circles in different constituencies in Singapore. Right, as you can see, for campus side, we're anchoring the northeast region of Singapore, which is with Punggol West, right, together with partners like SOS, SAMH, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, there are other constituencies like Mocha, where they serve the general population, and some of them actually serve the elderly and seniors, right? So we want to actually target different segments of society through these wellbeing circles. Next. Right, so one example of what we're doing at Punggol West with the Lighthouse program is actually working with partners in the social service sector, like for example, Samaritans or Singapore SOS, Singapore Association for Mental Health, to run the U-Mentor Peer Support Training Program for secondary school student leaders and equipping them with skill sets to better support their peers who are in distress. And this is also in collaboration with our volunteers. Yeah. Okay, next. Yes, so I'll probably share a bit more about the U-Mentor Peer Support Training at Punggol West. Through this U-Mentor Peer Support Training, we hope to actually equip student leaders like the peer support leaders, the student counselors, your monitors, right? First point of context, right? To actually serve and better support and be trained with these skill sets to actually respond and support their peers who are in distress. And so this program is uniquely curated for youth who are above 13 years old to about 16 to 17 years old. Next. Right, so some of the outcomes that we have actually gathered, right, from the program itself, and we believe in impact measurement for our program. So 80% of the youth felt that the program helped in improving their mental health literacy. 85% of the youth felt more confident in supporting their peers who might be in distress or struggling with mental health issues. And 90% of our youth felt that they got to learn more about the community mental health resources for referrals and help seeking. Next. Yeah. Next. Okay. Right. So we always believed in the power of collaboration, the power of bringing friends from the public and private and people sector together. So every quarter, the SG Mental Wellbeing Network will actually organize such partnerships networking night to bring together like-minded partners from the 3P sectors, right, to actually share some of their resources and also some of their ideas to better actually support Singaporeans in their mental well-being. Next. Right, so some of the impact that we've gotten, right, we've worked with over 50 partners through the wellbeing circles over the past 2 years, trained over 600 individuals or volunteers in peer support skills, and reach out to more than about 3,000 individuals and volunteers. Currently, we've organized about 6 partner networking nights and engaged over 140 partners from the public, private, and people sectors. Next. Right, so another national initiative that we're involved in is actually the National Anti-Stigma Campaign Beyond the Label, which is also in partnership with NCSS and Touch Community Services. So it includes our friends from the social service sector and also the Institutes of Higher Learning. We've been doing every year, there's a Beyond the Label Fest where we showcase different mental health resources that are out there for young people and also volunteers who might be keen to join us in this vision and mission. Right, next. Okay, probably we can jump to the next slide. Yeah, because we have only 3 minutes. One more slide. Next slide. Yeah. Yep. So this is my second last slide, right? So what are some of the success factors that we believe in at Campus Sci to drive strong volunteer culture amongst our youth and also our young adults, right? So I've distilled actually five of the key factors that our young people have feedback to us that really help in retaining volunteers and their peers. Right, so the first one is really to have an aligned or common purpose and vision. Our young people really believed in having a strong purpose and vision. They're strong advocates of different causes, social causes, and mental health is really one of it. And of course, we have sustainability and other causes that they believed in. So if your organization has a strong purpose and vision and involving them in your mission, right, this is key to actually retaining them and exciting them. The second one is really providing them with ample volunteer development and training opportunities. So every year we've actually invested quite a lot of resources in developing our volunteers. So just now I mentioned, they have to go through about a 3-month, quite rigorous volunteer training or peer supporters training with our partner organizations in the mental space, right? And of course, leadership progression. So our volunteers and our youth also believe that, it'll be good if, let's say, those who have leadership qualities or initiatives, they can proceed, progress to be volunteer leaders and then mentoring and guiding the younger ones to actually step up. And of course, we believe in actually providing opportunities for our volunteers to serve on an organizational level, sectoral level in the mental space, and also on national level on the different opportunities and initiatives that we have. And I think this is something that is very important, right? Because the youth feel that they are involved, right? The volunteers feel that they are involved. And this comes to my last point, which is actually to build a very strong sense of community and belonging And most of our volunteers actually stay with us for more than 2 to 3 years. Yeah. Next. Nick, can I have the last slide? Okay, yeah, so I leave you with this quote, which I really like, which is by Margaret Mead, a famous US anthropologist. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has, right? So never underestimate a group of social service practitioners or even volunteers who are passionate about a certain cause and coming together to impact the community. With that, thank you so much for your time. Yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Yun Chiu. Yeah.
No
Thank you. And thank you for rushing through it. I know time is a bit short for every one of our speakers. Yeah. So if there were anything that you feel that is really important that we should go back to, right? I think we can give you that 1 minute or so if you would like to re-emphasize some points. If not, then we will jump into the Q&A with you. Yeah. Are you all right? Anything else you need to maybe highlight to our participants today?
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually I had one more slide, but it's okay. Yeah, so just now I was sharing about the upcoming National Mental Health Youth Wellness Center, which is called the Integrated Wellness Center at SCAPE. So we're actually recruiting nationwide on youth and young adults aged 18 to 30 years old who want to be trained as peer supporters to serve fellow youths in that new center at SCAPE, which will be launched around April this year. So you can go to our Facebook, Instagram, or even on LinkedIn, right, to share with your networks in your respective organizations or to your loved ones and friends who are keen to join us. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks for that. And maybe just following on to your plug just now, right? In your involvement as a volunteer yourself, right? Perhaps to hear from you a little bit more on your own experience and your thoughts about the effect of volunteering on mental health, and specifically, volunteers that are supporting and contributing to the social service sector.
Well, thanks so much, King Hui, for that question. To be honest, right, volunteering really impacted my life. Actually, when I was in uni, I didn't think that I would start a non-profit organization or come into the social service sector, right? But it was really through volunteering with a Muslim boys' home called Muhammadiyah. Back then it was at Bedok, now I think it's at Pasir Ris. And then I think that's where it ignited my passion in working with youth, particularly at-risk youth. So back then I was actually volunteering and mentoring these young probationers at Muhammadiyah to actually prepare them for their private N-levels. And really, I think that 1 year with them, seeing them doing so well in the private N-levels and now doing so well having their families and in the school, I think it really inspired me. And I think that really got me into the social service sector. Yeah, prior to that, I was thinking of going to the civil service after graduating from uni. But I realized that, wow, working with this youth really changed me and really inspired me. And that's why I went into working with at-risk youth with another social service agency and Singapore Prison Service. And then thereafter, volunteering with IMH and I founded my team together. We founded our organization, Campus Sci. Yeah, and never looked back since then. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I see a couple of questions that are on the safeguarding practices, right? Because your volunteers are engaging and interfacing with perhaps minors and those who are most vulnerable, right? With their state of mind. So can you maybe share how do you manage this risk, and if there are extra parental consent or legal considerations that you need to take in some of this service delivery with volunteer supporting?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, King Hui. It's a very important question. So before we actually, after the volunteers have signed up through our programs for the mental health related programs and stuff, we will actually have introductory chats with them. So a team of professionals like social workers and counselors, we would actually engage and find out more from them, some of their past lived experiences. So some of these youths, they want to give back, but they also have their own personal mental lived experiences. And this is good because the thing is, they can actually leverage on that and actually empathize more with fellow youths who are in distress. But the thing is, like you mentioned, there probably might be transference and all. And so we will actually take note into that. And of course, we will also have certain risk assessment in place to actually safeguard both the volunteers and also the clients or the distressed youth that we're working with. So we have been working with psychiatrists and psychologists and partner organizations together with our staff team to ensure, right, that the risks are mitigated, and our clients and also our volunteers are all protected.
Thanks. Maybe just to dive a little bit deeper, and also a question from our participants today. When you talk about managing volunteers and managing the risk that they are exposing themselves to when engaging with your clients, what are perhaps some of those practices that you conduct for your volunteers after each session, for example?
Right. So we actually have supervision sessions by trained social workers and psychologists and counselors. And so what we do is that we have weekly sessions to actually engage our youth peer supporters who are actively engaging with this distress youth. And if, let's say, they show any signs of distress or if they have any challenges emotionally, right, they will share with us, and then we will actually help to support them in this area. And to walk them through this journey itself. So our volunteers are never left alone, right? We always have a team of professionals to actually journey this with them. Yeah, so supervision is one. Then, of course, we have group work together with them. And so that, when they have any challenges or they have any emotional regulation issues, right, they can actually share this with us.
Thanks. So also on the same topic of engaging or deploying volunteers, right, into your service delivery programs, right? You were sharing just now that the life cycle of these volunteers are between 2 to 3 years, right? How then do you manage to create and sustain this community of volunteers, right? Are there specific examples you can share with our participants today?
Yeah, so I think involving them in our different committees and different programs and services, which I shared earlier, was very important. So as to give them a sense of belonging and also a sense of agency, right? So a lot of our youth volunteers, they want to do something, and tapping on the different strengths and interests. Like, for example, some of our volunteers, they're good in terms of designing. So we'll involve them in our publicity and outreach committees for our events and programs. So they help us with the designing of the EDMs, the posters and all, or social media posts and that. For those who are actually more inclined into probably programs and services or organizing events, right? They have such skill sets. Then we'll involve them in the programs and events management committee, where they actually can co-curate such programs and events together with us on a national level. Yeah, so these are just some examples of how do we actually involve them so that, they feel that they're contributing to the organization and they feel that there's a sense of agency.
Thanks. Just then, also on a related matter with engaging volunteers to co-create programs and perhaps at that level of engagement, right? There's a question from a participant on how do you engage these volunteers in, or do you engage these volunteers in crafting your volunteer management policies at the organization level? And perhaps my own question to you, are there certain eligibility criteria that you're looking at when you're trying to identify volunteers at this level of contribution?
Right. So with regards to that, we actually have sort of like a youth advisory committee where some of them, they have experience interning in different social service agencies and all. And then, they will co-create certain practices and policies together with us. But of course, we won't involve all volunteers in this area, only those who have related experiences, and of course, they have interests to actually join this with us. Yeah.
Thanks. And I guess also then just maybe shifting a little bit our focus onto demographics of volunteers that you engage, right? We understand you engage a lot of youth volunteers in your organization, right? But in social service sector, I think many of us are experiencing that youth volunteers are very much focused on the ad hoc participation, and they would like to experience many different types of experiences in the community. How do you, sustain that engagement and keep them engaged over a longer period of time?
Yeah, so really retaining their interest and retaining their engagement with us is important. So what we do is that every quarter, we actually have bonding sessions together with our volunteers and staff team itself. We organize team bonding events and activities to actually engage them through outings and stuff, right? And also to actually treat them with a good meal, right? And programs and certain so we have, sorry, can you hear the arrow?
No, we're good. We're good.
So sorry. Yeah.
No, we're good.
So yeah, so such events and outings and stuff would really actually help to engage them. And a lot of times, it's also curated and organized by them. So depending on their interest, they will also be organizing such events and programs every quarterly. Yeah.
Okay. Quarterly engagements. Oh, okay. Thanks for that. Nuggets of wisdom. Yeah. Maybe just then, one other question that I'm spotting on Slido, right, is that in terms of engaging volunteers to become leaders, right? Do you do that as a covert operation where perhaps you invite identified volunteers to take up the leadership role, or actually you advertise that and allow volunteers to apply on their own merits, right? Because I think the participant here is indicating that there may be a fear of creating division among the volunteers.
Yeah, so during our introductory chat with them after, they have signed up with us as volunteers, we would actually check in with them if, they have prior leadership experiences or they have interest to take up certain leadership roles after 1 or 2 years with us. But of course, we don't throw them in directly in the first year, when they just join us as a volunteer. I think from the first and second year, we want to see if they're committed. I see some of the questions on the commitment of our volunteers. We want to ensure that, they have been giving and contributing in our different committees during our first year. And if they show signs or exhibit signs of leadership traits, right, then, and also interest, I think interest is very important, and commitment, right? So these are some criteria that I see it in the questions from our participants in a Zoom chat. So these are some of the criteria that we look into when we actually develop and identify these leaders. Then from there, once the commitment levels, the interest, and the leadership traits all align, then we'll ask them if they want to take up certain leadership positions in the different committees. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is that there isn't a very urgent challenge here, right? That volunteers feel that they are more preferred by you or not, right? Because you've laid all upfront, very transparent in your process.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe a quick question from me, right? Because of your status as a founder for Campus Side, if we could hear from you, maybe 1 or 2 strategic enablers, right, that positions your organization to enhance manpower capacity through leveraging volunteers. Yeah. What are those 1 to 2 strategic enablers that you have been observing so far?
I think just now I've shared 5 success factors, right, that help us quite a bit. And I think that really helps in terms of our strategy. Providing a strong purpose and mission and opportunities for our volunteers to contribute and to serve. I think these two strategies and these 2 factors are very important in ensuring that our volunteers are fully engaged with the organization. Yeah.
Thanks again for reminding us of the 5 points that you've raised, right? So just at this point, if I can call back all our speakers on screen, right, as we move into the general Q&A questions. So for all our participants, if there were a couple of questions that we've missed due to time constraints, if you can also kindly bring back those questions for us, right? Our guys at MPAC will also try to identify those questions that we have not answered perhaps for Eric, for Eileen, right? And then we could use this time now to revisit some of your questions as well. Yeah. Right. So similarly, for those who would like to ask additional questions to our speakers at this time, right? Do log on to Slido and you can post your questions there. Yeah. So thanks again to all our speakers for your sharing of your knowledge and your experiences across the different service clusters, right? So perhaps as a start, right? What we have today is a gathering of speakers who represents the different service clusters, right? If I can get each of the speakers perhaps to share with us, right? What will be that, what will be a key strategy for you when you are looking to leverage on volunteers to enhance manpower capacity? right, in relation to maybe delivering your service programs, right? What would be that key strategy that you are looking at? Anybody?
I think really for me, again, it's really about does it make sense for volunteers to support their particular services lah? Right? It's not only a getting, or we need to get volunteers in every single services, but does it make sense? Is volunteer really required to address certain manpower issues that that our colleagues may have with the respective programs and services? Or for example, you can look at it from a horizontal or a vertical point of view. In terms of horizontal, are they going to expand the services? And by expanding the services, there are certain needs for volunteers to come in to augment the manpower to allow the expansion to happen. Then it makes sense, right? So, or when we look at vertical, looking at getting more insights, for example, which part of that getting more insight into the community, at which part can volunteers come in to support? Or if, for example, if the information is if we are working with vulnerable populations, for example, working with people who have suffered from abuse, right? Then in that case, for some of the services and programs, can we have volunteers involved? What are the risks involved? Does it make sense for volunteers to be involved in this? Do they pose additional potentially triggers for the vulnerable population that is served, right? If the answer is yes, and we are unable to mitigate the risk, then usually I won't recommend for volunteers to be involved. Again, it's really about does it make sense for the program and services? Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. Perhaps Eileen, any quick points to share?
I mean, I do agree with what Eric shared. It's not all the program requires volunteers. As much as we wanted volunteers to support us to, expand our manpower capacity, but it's really at the end is the clients that we are looking at. What is the impact that we want to create? We cannot just take in volunteers and at the end the service quality drops and affects the so-called experience and the impact on the clients. Yeah, so it's really a balancing skills. A lot of conversation has to be ongoing with the program staff to understand the needs. And then we only zoom into areas that we can tap on volunteers to support us.
Thanks for that response. Yeah. So zooming in on areas, right? Perhaps if I can check with you, Eileen, when you talk about zooming in on the areas, specifically, are you referring to maybe conducting a quick needs assessment among your programs team or service delivery team so that you can better identify which are the services or programs that are ready?
Yes, like Eric mentioned, it's really we need to understand the work of our program, in the first place. We need to really understand what is the program objective, what are we trying to achieve, what is the impact that we want to create for our clients. Then from there, we can branch out to see that, what area of the work of the professional, for instance, can be leave to the volunteers to support. Some work that are, I wouldn't say not important, but they can do more with volunteers because they are more helping hands. They have the time to engage where the staff might not have that capacity for. Then we can channel the staff resources to help in higher impact work. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So
Yep.
so thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
I think just to add on to Eileen's point, can we I think like at KKCS, I think some things that I do is really to initiate conversation with the respective services, probably in a yearly, for example, after they even when they are looking at curating their work plans for the next year, right? So I usually will initiate conversations with the different service unit and ask them, oh, is there any needs for volunteers to help support the work plan for next year? Also allowing them to think of it, because sometimes when when we are very focused on, hey, what are the clinical outcomes and all that stuff, right, done by staff, they may not have that having volunteers in mind. It's also to bring that element of volunteerism back to the different service unit and ask them, okay, so for your work plan, is there any area that volunteers can support, or I can help them look through it and also have a more in-depth discussion on what are the needs, whether in terms of needs analysis, is there any area that are really volunteers can do support? If not, then it's perfectly fine also. I think it's really about supporting the organization on a much more holistic kind of perspective. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Make sure. Just want to get back to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I totally agree with what Eric and Eileen has shared. Really, not all programs and services or requires volunteer involvement. So, like for example, I think intervention services, particularly working with vulnerable communities like people with mental health issues or people with disabilities, right? And this requires trained professionals, right? With the right academic qualifications and experiences to do this. And so when we train these peer supporters, right, we also upfront before we train them, we also let them know that, we're not training them to be mental professionals, to be a psychologist or a counselor. We're just training them to be first responders with very basic mental literacy and peer support skills so that they can be the first responders. And I think this is very important to ensure that having the right programs and services and involving the right volunteers or the staff team in these programs and services is important. And I totally agree with what Eileen has mentioned. What kind of impact are we looking at if we really want to involve these volunteers? Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, just following up then on, so what impact do we want to see when we are leveraging volunteers, right, to enhance manpower capacity, right? Perhaps I can hear from any of our speakers today on how then do you identify or scope that impact that you're hoping to see, right? And perhaps how do you manage that conversation together with your board or your senior management team?
Sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I was just following on to Ming Xiu's point on being specific about what impact you would like to see when you are engaging volunteers, right? So perhaps we focus on engaging volunteers to support service delivery, right? So specifically, are there any impact, right? Impact indicators perhaps that you are looking at for your organization when you strategically, right, deploy volunteers to support service delivery? If any of our speakers would like to respond first.
I think I can go first. At the top of my mind, I think it's really about again going back to what exactly is the impact of the services. So, for example, if taking Kickstart, for example, if the objective of the program and services itself to involve volunteers is to really having volunteers to enhance, for example, the engagement of disadvantaged children, whereby they have, sometimes in developmental psychology, we often talk about, play as a very important element in the child's development, right? So how does the increased time of play by the volunteers with the children have led to certain developmental milestones that we can see? I think that is also an impact. Yeah. Yeah, let me use an example. Really about how, for example, how in terms of well-being, looking at different metrics, looking at different. Sorry, was someone talking? Okay, looking at different matrix. For example, if you look at well-being or even look at quality of life, it's a before and after thing, whereby does having befrienders, for example, helps in change of perspective, or helps in the different items on the quality of life survey, for example, or the questionnaire, right? Look at it from a psychometric point of view, right? So how does it impact certain measurement that you are going to use for your services itself, right? How can volunteers make an impact or help you achieve that particular matrix that you are looking at? I think this is also part of understanding that services itself, right? As part of the needs analysis. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Eileen or Ming, any quick response to this question?
I think we really have to make sure that we align the so-called what we want to see from volunteers, what kind of contribution impact they can create, align back to the program that we are doing. Yeah, because volunteers are here to support us, to expand our reach. I think there are certain things that might not have a very direct outcome. For instance, with volunteers, we can maybe serve more clients with more programs running. Yeah, so that we can reduce the dependence on the staff, and we can channel the staff resources to other more important areas. So I don't have a direct answer to the questions. I think it's really a lot depending on the actual situation, the programs that we are looking, and it's the alignment that we really have to stress upon.
Thanks, Eileen. Yeah, I mean, I would also want to refer to the volunteer impact measurement kit that we recently launched, right? NCSS recently launched, and I think one category of impact that possibly we could all think about to measure, as what Eileen is describing, is the impact on staff, right? Yeah, how are they feeling in terms of elevating workload so that they can do more high quality work, for example, while leaving the volunteers to manage program on the ground, for example, right? So these are all indicators that we could also take a quick reference to in the volunteer impact measurement kit that was launched as well. Yeah, just for everyone's information. Yeah, Ming, any quick nuggets of wisdom that you can share with us on this matter on impact?
Thanks, Eileen, for chiming in earlier. Yeah, actually, I think there's one question, right, on how do we actually present it to the board on the KPIs, right, on impact measurement of our programs and services involving the volunteers. And of course, usually, for agencies, we're looking at the numbers, the quantitative, more of the quantitative KPIs and stuff. I think, but like what Keng Hui has mentioned in terms of the matrix and impact measurement by NCSS, a lot of times, I think we also need to look at the qualitative side of things. Pre-post, so what we do at Campus High is that, we usually do a pre-post kind of evaluation or program evaluation with our peer supporters, so that, before the training itself, they probably have probably at a Likert scale, it's 2 to 3 level of knowledge of mental literacy and peer support skills. Then after they go through the training, it's about probably 7 to 8. So really, in terms of developing our young people, right, in their knowledge and skill sets, there's value addedness, right? And I think impact is really value adding, not just to our beneficiaries or the clients we serve, right, but also to the volunteers and to the staff team, like you mentioned earlier. So I think really the value addedness, the investment and the development of our volunteers, our staff team is very important.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think it's really also, apart from measuring impact of volunteers that are supporting service delivery programs, it's also equally important to share these impact indicators, right, and the results of measuring this impact with key stakeholders, right, so that they continue to support this effort to engage and maintain engagement with volunteers. Yeah, so thanks for that. I think I just want to quickly refer to a question from our participants. There was a question on training, right? As we are deploying volunteers to support service delivery programs or organizational capacity needs programs, there's a very high need to train them before they are deployed. right? But many of our SSAs may be facing this issue of our volunteers not willing to commit more time to engage in training. Perhaps among our three speakers, anybody who has some good practices to share to how do we encourage volunteers to come for training?
Maybe I can start first. I think we have to really make training into small bites, easier for volunteers, because volunteers are having other commitments. They can be working adults, they can be students. So if you have a too long kind of training, sometimes it is quite challenging for them to attend. So for us, we will do it into a bite size. Of course, for new volunteers, there are certain compulsory training that we want them to go through, like disability awareness, how to handle people with disabilities. Yeah, so these are things that maybe range from 2 hours to 3 hours max. Yeah, so for them to get a hang of it, to start their volunteering work with us. Then after that, it's really on a ongoing basis, and it's really in bite size. We are looking into tapping on our LMS system, where we can post the modules online, where volunteers can do their so-called on time, on target learning. Yeah, so I think it's easier for that, because sometimes when you want to combine all the volunteers together, it can be challenging to find a common schedule for everyone.
Thanks. Yeah, I like the bite-sized training, right? So that we don't take a full day to train them. Yeah, and everybody's busy too. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Any of our other speakers would like to add your point of view?
I think I can share a bit. I think it's also really having that training commitment for that particular role itself as part of the JD lah, right? When we are recruiting volunteers, so they know it right from the start, and not to surprise them with the training. That's one. I think like what Eileen mentioned, also having in bite size, but also we may be combining them into sessions whereby there are also fun elements in it lah. Whereby, for example, it's like a mini kind of appreciation plus training kind of thing, whereby you don't have to go through the entire maybe 2 hours of just training itself. That's also one. But I think also during the interview process, the screening process, it's also important to also highlight why do they need training. Going back to the why do they need training? What kind of impact they can have if with the beneficiaries that, or with the clients that they serve, if they go through the training. I think again, a lot of us have good intentions when we want to volunteer, right? So tap on that good intention to let them know that, hey, this training are important because of what? How does it align with their good intention, right? So again, they then hoping that it will also help to enhance their intrinsic motivation to come for the training, and also apply the training lah, right? Because without that motivation to apply the training, no matter how much training they go through, yeah, it's a bit difficult also. Yeah.
Understand. Thanks. Ming, I think you've got yourself on mute.
Yes, finally. Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Eric, for that sharing. I fully concur. Really, I think the appreciation and the recognition of our volunteers is very important. A lot of times we know that they are very giving in nature, right? But the thing is, there will always be fatigue, like what Eileen has mentioned. Fatigue in coming for trainings, fatigue in, after work and after school, coming to actually serve in different programs and services. And I think what we can do is really to recognize them. So what we do at Campus High is that, we have graduation ceremonies to present them with certificates of appreciation, and also to just treat them, to a meal or a banquet of sorts, right? A lot of them are students, right? So this is something that, they look forward to, bonding with their friends through barbecue and stuff. These are probably very little things and common sense things that we can do and stuff. But a lot of times, I think because we are all very busy with the work in the social service sector, right? So a lot of times, we tend to miss out this very important factor of letting people feel appreciated and feeling recognized for the work that they do. And also, I think like what Eric mentioned, always remind them of the why, because why is really very important. And being transparent with them, when they have signed up or before they have signed up, what they're signing up for, and why are they involved with your organization or your programs and services. And I think Paul has a question in the Zoom chat, right? In the success factors and stuff. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah. I also saw in one of the questions that I posted on Slido, right? Specifically, it was for Eric and Eileen, but I think it's also applicable to Ming Xiu yourself, right? This question relates to how each of you handle volunteers' liability as they are integrated into service delivery programs, right? They are now at the front line of service delivery. How then do you manage volunteers' liability for your organization?
For SPD, most of the time our volunteers are deployed with staff around. Yeah, we don't really leave everything to the volunteers per se. Yeah, so there are staff still supporting the program. Volunteers are there to assist. So in terms of that, I think we can minimize the so-called any risks that we might foresee to ensure that volunteer also get supported from the staff to do their work. Yeah, it's not solely on them, that if something happened to the clients, they are the one responsible. Yeah, so it's a mutual thing. We provide that ecosystem to support everyone to make sure that we get the job done.
Yep, just to add on to Eileen points, then I think it's also looking at the nature of the work, then whether there's a need for escalation protocols, right? That is also part of training, whereby we know them that, hey, if there are certain things that happen, for example, there are agitation involved, aggression involved that they are unable to manage, or there are certain issues whereby clients may express suicide ideation, what to do next, right? These risk escalation protocols can be both for center-based and also community-based kind of roles. But of course, for community-based roles, these are a lot more important, right? But like what Eileen has mentioned, that definitely they must have a line to the social service professional involved in that program. No matter what happens, right? So they must have a line. They cannot be left like not knowing what to do, who to turn to. So I think a lot of times that line of support must be expressed explicitly to the volunteers when they are being deployed. So let them know that, hey, in case you have any doubts, in case of certain things that happen, you can follow the escalation protocol, and also you can also definitely call the social service professionals in the line of duty. Yeah.
Yep, Ming Xiu.
Yeah, just want to actually build on what Eric has mentioned. For us, because we work primarily with people with mental health conditions, and it's very sensitive, like what Eileen is doing with SPD, also people with disabilities, and that's why I think SOPs are very important. Yeah, so we have very specific standard operating procedures to actually ensure that if, let's say, there's a crisis, let's say, the client that we're working with or the young person we are working with has suicidal ideations or is already attempting suicide, what are some of the protocols that they need to escalate, right? They need to first inform the staff team, then thereafter escalate it probably to SCDF or even SOS or even IMH itself. So all these are actually laid out so that the volunteers are not caught off guard. Right, so SOPs are important in crisis management, but also like what Eileen has mentioned, I think working very closely with our professionals, our staff team is very important because we don't want to actually leave our volunteers with just with the clients themselves because they're not trained professionals, right? And also it actually provides assurance to the volunteers that that they are actually looked after by a trained professional. And I think that's very important, giving the volunteers an assurance that if anything happens, there's a trusted adult or professional there to actually guide them. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks. We've talked a bit about recognizing volunteers as part of sustaining their engagement just now, right? I spotted a question from a participant on how do we then continue to recognize, or how do we recognize these volunteers' contributions if they are more extrinsically motivated versus being intrinsically motivated? Like, for example, Eric, just now you talk about training being an intrinsic motivation for them to skill up, right? But then there may be volunteers who are a little bit more extrinsic in nature. Right? So how do you recognize some of their contributions? Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about the appreciation of volunteers, I also love to go back to the 5 love languages, huh? You know, how does it apply to volunteer recognition, right? Sometimes it's really looking at if they need certain recognition in terms of affirmation, right? I think a lot of times the frontline social service professional engaging the volunteer, these are very important, very important comrades in our volunteer management work, right? So that's why a lot of times finding when they are doing the debrief with the volunteers, you know, spelling out specific examples that they have done well, is also important in recognizing them on the spot itself, and not leaving it to just, oh, you know, like end of the year we have a you know, appreciation event and all that stuff, right? So that is important, but also at the same time I think day-to-day kind of appreciation, like affirmation. Also maybe even if you look at gift, even if you look at even looking at acts of service, for example, then you know, sometimes volunteers may have suggestion, you know, taking those suggestions seriously can also help to motivate and appreciate the volunteers, you know, doing their work. Because I think sometimes when volunteers, they are on the ground, you know, they may have specific insights or suggestions that may really be really good. So it's really to taking those suggestions seriously and really going through them. I think to me, I see that as an act of service to them, right? So these are some examples. Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so taking over from here, co-moderating with King Hui. Yeah, so earlier on you talk about appreciating volunteers, right? Whether is it extrinsic, even then we still want to appreciate them regardless of their, you know, using the 5 love languages as a means. So perhaps how about besides appreciating, how about a question from the audience that asks about working with different types of volunteers? So now it's not the nature of motivation, but the way that they contribute. In terms of like some are skilled professionals, some may be more on just general volunteers, right? So how is that, might the appreciation differ, or yeah, perhaps can you share on that?
I think just to share, with regards to the question, it really depends on going in a little bit deeper. It really depends on the volunteer themselves, right? So no matter whether they are skilled volunteers or general volunteers, what are the opportunities for appreciation, right? So for example, the skilled volunteers, maybe for example, they are designing a particular IT kind of application for the agency itself, right? Then it's really about after the product has been finished, should you have like a thank you kind of session with them, right? That's one. Or for general volunteers, like I mentioned earlier, after every session, if you can do it. Whether is it project-based or is it session-based, I think the differences provide different forms of platforms or opportunities for appreciation, and different methodology can be used. So again, it's really about what are the platforms available, what are the projects with it, whether is it project-based or is it regular service-based, and also what kind of resources does the agency have, right? So even when we want to, you know, like we appreciate our volunteers with really customized gift or something along the line. It really most SSAs, most of us we wouldn't have that kind of budget lah, right? But I think a lot of times it's really understanding also. For example, skilled volunteers, understanding also why do they want to do it. They're using their talents, right? So to appreciate them for their talents sometimes is just a matter of formation. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Perhaps I also hear from Eileen or Ming. How does it apply? You mentioned differs by organizations and also the nature of resources and so on. So let's hear from the rest as well. Anyone?
I quite agree with what Eric says. I guess volunteers come in with good intention, whether they are skill-based, whether they are just generic volunteers. It is that engagement that we have with the volunteers that matters most. Yeah, because as long as they know that whatever contribution that they make can really impact on the clients, on the program, I think that is the greatest appreciation that they will enjoy. Yeah, it might not be material kind of whether it's a token, whether is it a appreciation dinner or things like that. Yeah, but it's the constant engagement. We provide that feedback, that channel of communications. When volunteers feel that whatever they say or they put in their feedback are valued by the organization, and they see that we really translate whatever their contribution, so-called their ideas into practices, I think that is also a form of so-called appreciation to the volunteers. For skill-based volunteer, I think like Eric mentioned, the volunteers are in to go share their talents. So what they want to see maybe is on the impact that they create. For instance, let's say they help us with IT system, then is to share the benefit that we get, how it helps to cut maybe manpower hours that we use, cut down on the processes and things like that. So this will give the motivation to the volunteers, especially skills-based volunteers.
Thank you, Eileen.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Ming.
I fully agree with what Eileen has mentioned. I think it's really right-citing the right volunteers to the right committees and stuff. So like, for example, skills-based volunteers, let's say they're from the corporates, they are from consulting firm, then you can involve them in your committees or your subcommittees or even in your boards, right? Because they have the expertise in that area, be it in strategy, be it in other areas that requires their professional expertise. Yeah, then for youth or young adults probably still studying in the IHLs, just now, I think we have a question on how do we actually help those or acknowledge these students, these volunteers who are extrinsically motivated, right? So I think one very helpful area is really providing them with a resume, helping them with their resume by providing them with a letter of appreciation, or even if let's say they need to apply for a scholarship, right? Or they need to apply for a job in the social service sector, which a lot of our volunteers, after they finish their stint with us, right? Many of them actually go on to become social service or health professionals. And it's really helped because it shows that, that we appreciate them, but at the same time, extrinsically, so really recognizing the right volunteers in the right capacity, it's very important.
Yeah, just to add on, I think Ming and I are examples. We know each other when we were volunteers, and now we are in the sector, right? So in that sense, yeah.
Thanks again, for sharing, and it's good to know that you guys are the apex story, right, of volunteers turned staff, and now are leading, right, in each of your respective domains as well. Well, I'm just mindful of time as well, right? I just want to maybe pose a last question to each of our speakers, right? As we close off this general Q&A segment, what is that one key learning, right? As you have experience in integrating volunteers into service delivery programs, into organization development programs, right? What is that one key learning that you would like to highlight to our participants today, on this area?
I can go first. I think the one key learning is to understand why. It's really to understand why you need the volunteers, why the services need the volunteers, and why the services do the services that it does, right? So once we understand why, then it's easier to align with each other to augment that having volunteers to augment the manpower lah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, for me, I think we really have to view volunteer not just an extension of manpower. They bring unique perspective, their skills, their energy, their effort, that they come and support us. They can help us to enrich and transform our service delivery. So I think my learning point is to how to build a very strong ecosystem of support. I want to give the volunteer whatever support that we can, and together we can work together with the staff to create that impact that we wanted to as in the first place as an organization.
Thanks, Eileen. Yeah.
Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I think for myself, I think one key takeaway working with volunteers for over the past decade is really how do we value add to our volunteers, be it in their personal lives, right? Be it in their studies or in their careers. Some of the volunteers, when they come into this because they want to actually venture into the social service sector or the healthcare sector, right? And so how do we then actually provide the resources to actually develop our youth volunteers or young adult volunteers? And those probably, in the adult age or seniors who actually volunteer with us, in their life stage, how do we also help to make them feel meaningfully engaged, right? Because like what Eileen and Eric has mentioned, they spend the precious time. All of us are busy people, right? We are either working or schooling, right? How do we then ensure that we actually provide them with the right resources to really ensure that they succeed in life too, right? Because they want our clients, they work with our youth and our clients and to ensure that the lives succeed, but we also want to ensure that they are a successful person also in their own rights. Yeah. So value addedness. Thank you.
Thanks, Mingshu. And so with that, I want to thank all our three speakers for so willingly sharing your own learnings and your own perspectives, right, with all the participants that we have here today. Right. So as we reach the end of the session today, right, we would like to express our deepest gratitude for everyone, right, who have taken time to join us for today's session. And if you don't mind, if we can encourage you to maybe scan the QR code now on your screen, right, and provide us your frank feedback of how we have done for this session and what you have learned from this session as well as you reflect, right? Your feedback is really important to us as there are 2 more volunteer management network sessions that we will conduct across the next 2 months. So if I can just give everyone 2-3 minutes to scan and provide your inputs. All right, I think as you are providing your inputs to us, some of you may have completed it as I'm speaking. So if I can just do a plug for our upcoming sessions, right? While many of you may still be providing your inputs as well. Yeah. So the upcoming 2 sessions for volunteer management network sessions are on the 20th of February, right? Same time, right? And on the 12th of March. Yeah. So if you all can jot this down on your calendars as well, and we would definitely appreciate if. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Can. Yeah, one of my earpieces died, so I thought I wasn't audible. Yeah. So we definitely welcome you back to join us for the next volunteer management network sessions. Yeah. And for the next slide, just want to highlight to you, right? An upcoming series is the second run of the volunteer management workshop series, right? On enhanced service delivery through volunteerism partnership, right? For some of us who have attended this workshop series last year, you'll remember that we leverage on this platform to engage volunteer managers, right? Not just volunteer managers, but board members, senior management team, right? And anyone really who engages and manages volunteers to come together to co-develop solutions to some of the challenges that we meet and we face when managing volunteers, right? And so there are 3 sessions that are planned by NCSS. These are all in-person sessions, right? The first session will be on the 24th of February, right? Session 2, which is on redesigning volunteer roles to support service delivery, will be on the 27th February. And the last session of the workshop series is on 5th March, right? On building successful volunteerism partnership for service delivery. So definitely would appreciate if you all can take time to join us at this in-person session, not just to help us to co-solution, but also, take this opportunity to further network with fellow volunteer managers in the community, right? So at this point, I really would like to close this session, right? And on behalf of NCSS and us at MPAC, we wish you a very restful rest of the evening and a fruitful remainder of the week. And we definitely look forward to seeing you at all these engagement opportunities, either virtual or in person, that NCSS has planned for you, right? And so I'm Keng Hui, and with me, I have Esther, right? And we are signing off for today, right? Thank you very much for taking time to join us today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.